What's the strangest thing you've caught someone doing in the workplace? I once saw an old bloke slowly walk near a tree, have his hat pushed off by one of the low-hanging branches, then proceed to slowly pick up the hat, declare, "I avenge myself" in a neutral tone, and then break a twig off the tree before slowly walking off. Story 2. I used to work in retail, and I did a rotational evening shift with this weird dude. He was about 50-ish, fairly mild-mannered, didn't make too much fuss, friendly, etc. One day I didn't clock in until 20 minutes after I was supposed to start due to a car accident blocking my route to work. Normally, I greet him at the warehouse door as he has to let me in, but he must have assumed I wasn't coming because I spotted him in the dark corner by the generator with a small spotlight on the shelf behind him. He had a pile of broken stuff returned by customers and was looking over it. I pressed the doorbell, and he hurriedly put it all away and came jogging over. I asked him about it, and he denied it at first, but I said I saw it, and he relented. He liked to fix things and take them home. Some he gave to charity, some he gave to his grandkids, some he gave to his wife. The dude was prolific. He had hidden a compartment in a shelf and padlocked it. It was behind panel in the internal wall behind the generator. For about an hour, I watched him take apart an electronic 9V drill, find the fault, and put it all back together again. From that moment on, neither of us did much work in the warehouse. To be fair, he confessed that he enjoyed the night shifts because all day shift had done most of the work. He would spend the first hour or so tidying up and finishing off the day shift's job, and then he would go out of sight of the CCTV cameras and just fix things because he loved doing it. Occasionally, one of us would do a lap to show the cameras we were working. Our job was to cross-check and catalog what the day shift had moved out of the warehouse against what was sold so they could always maximize warehouse space. It was dull, boring, but easy work. I hope that dude is okay, and I do think about him from time to time. Story 3. I have a few. To preface, I work in software technology, and just by default, you already get some people who aren't exactly socially inept. On top of that, my company also hires a lot of really smart people, like genius-level Emmett grads. As they say, there's a fine line between genius and insanity. One guy, when he needs to think or to take a break from his desk, will walk around the halls pretending to smoke a cigarette. He will pretend to take a drag, pretend to blow it out, and occasionally tap the ashes. When he gets back to his office, he will throw it on the ground and put it out with his foot. All imaginaries. I asked coworkers about this. I assumed maybe he smoked, and this was some way to cope with the loss of the ritual or routine. But no, he has never smoked a day in his life. My office is a casual dress workplace. No suit and tie, more business casual with jeans being acceptable. So it's pretty much wear what you want. Like if you were going out to meet friends for dinner. You can be dressier or even more casual. This one guy wears the same khaki pants and polo shirt every single day. It has a small, what looks to be grease, stain on the bottom right of his shirt. So it's easy to confirm it's the same. It recently blew everyone's mind. He switched it up. He started wearing a new polo. Except we are going on about 6 months for the new polo. Previous job, my company needed a new engineer to help flesh out a team for a new project. They hired this guy who was going to sit at the desk in this large office that I shared with another coworker. This guy looked like he could be an easy cast as a bridge troll in a live-action movie adaptation. He was 5'1" and at least 260 subs, with a balding fat Shrek-like head. He was also so overweight that he struggled to breathe and would sound like those pug dogs. This guy was an unusual character, to say the least. We had a glass door that went to the kitchen lunchroom. Like one of those framed glass doors where the middle and most of the door is glass, but there is a metal plate to open with your hand. He would open the door by putting his greasy hands directly on the center of the glass. The door was a grease streak by the end of the day. Signs had to be put up that were not followed. Work wasn't getting completed fast enough, and we chalked it up to him just being new and maybe adjusting. So my coworker and I were told to help out, keep an eye out for when he was struggling or hit a roadblock. Maybe he just didn't like to ask questions. As we start paying attention and checking on what's going on, we start noticing that more often than not, he has some fantasy RPG game up on his machine at work. The final straw was one day, a few months after he was hired, he came in with a full-blown cold sinus infection, like coughing, spitting into trash cans, and just horrible, gross sounds. He had to be told to go home. They called the staffing agency and said it wasn't working out. Checked his completed work to get some value from it, and found nothing. No completed work at all. The company tried to get money back from the staffing agency since they essentially paid for nothing, and the staffing agency needed more info. Our IT comes down and decides to see what's up with dude's machine and what he was doing. Turns out he was remoting into his home PC and playing some RPG games, and even had some bots set up on his work machine that performed some actions in the game to farm whatever was important in said game, using company machine resources. He was also downloading torrents to his work machine and copying them to his local. The kicker was his witchcraft books and guides he downloaded. He downloaded some witchcraft book along the lines of how to attract women, how to get women to like you through witchcraft. The time he wasn't playing his game or downloading crap, he spent the other portion of his time at work browsing Craigslist personal ads, Occupy, Match, and other dating websites. The dude pretty much came to work for about 2 months and got paid to do the same things he would do if he was at home, just ducking around on his computer. I'm just happy he didn't look at adult film. Story 4. Not sure if this counts, but in my old office, the windows along one side of the building overlooked a block of apartments. We often saw people hanging out on their balconies, drinking coffee or putting their laundry out or whatever. Then there was the fateful day. We all downed tools and went to stand at the window en masse, staring open-mouthed at the stark Bollock couple having lengthy sex right on the balcony opposite. Even our boss was only making the most half-hearted of motions to get us to go and get back to work. That was an interesting day. Story 5. This didn't happen to me, but my colleague. So the bathroom of our workplace was structured like an actual home bathroom. It had a bowl, along with a sink with a mirror over it, and dividing the room was the curtain which contained the shower area, but was simply used as a storage area for cleaning supplies. Usually the curtain was pulled all the way to the end, so all the cleaning materials wouldn't be in clear view when you enter it. So one time my colleague did her deed when she was done, flushed the toilet, and proceeded to the sink to wash her hands. But when she looked in the mirror, she was horrified. When she saw someone else's reflection from behind the curtain, it was our workplace's new cleaning lady. It turns out cleaning lady was hiding behind the curtain since she was texting on her phone, but she didn't leave when she heard someone enter and probably hoped no one noticed she was there. Because of this, I made it a habit to check if there's someone hiding behind the curtains before I use the bathroom. Story 6. At my old job, I once walked in on my manager thoroughly engrossed in making a herd of balloon animals while drinking a beer at 10 a.m. I work in pharmaceutical marketing. Some of the balloon animals were pretty cool. He gave me a Dachshund-shaped one. Story 7. 1987 Army Aviation Base in the southern U.S. Coworker in the aircraft sheet metal shop sets up to do some work inside the fuselage of an OV-1 turboprop plane while it is being serviced. While he is in there, just head and shoulders standing on the ground, the engine guys come to put the propeller on. It was off when the sheet metal guy went into the hole. They get it installed, spin it a few times, pack up and go. A few minutes later, sheet metal guy pulls out of the wing, closes the hatch, puts away his tools, picks up the very heavy toolbox, and wham, walks right into the stationary prop. He must have hit it hard. Same guy, about 9 months later. I wasn't in the shop for this one, but witnessed the aftermath. We had this big tool in the airframe shop called a pedal shears. We used it constantly for everything imaginable. It's really supposed to be used for big pieces, sheet aluminum and whatnot, but after a while, you got so that you could use it to nibble the edges off round shapes as well. What you did was to get the blade rocking in a nice rhythm and feed the piece under it, taking off a little at a time. It also has a safety feature that, unsurprisingly, had been disabled because it would prevent you from doing this. Obviously, you should be very careful while working something small. Sheet metal guy, who had probably done this 1,000 times without incident, went chunk and cut off his fingertip. I arrived sometime after the news spread like wildfire through the hangar. By then, someone had retrieved his finger from the scrap tray and taken him to the hospital. Didn't see sheet metal guy after that, and he was discharged soon after. Third unrelated item, same place, different players. In the 80s, we were part of what was called the Rapid Deployment Force, so that if something went down in the Middle East, we could quickly pack our whole company onto trucks and fly them to Saudi Arabia. We had a whole fleet of semi-trailers, trucks, connexes, generators, and the like. About once a year, we would do a loadout exercise to practice getting everything ready. One day, we were weighing our trucks at the truck scale and needed to remove the fences from the side of a flatbed trailer. The fences are slotted into brackets along the side of the trailer and are made of wood. When they sit mounted all year, they tend to stick and swell in the heat. Usually a few swipes with a sledgehammer will break them loose, but this particular one was stuck fast and nothing would dislodge it. One of the sergeants gets the idea to gently pick up on it with a forklift while someone whacks it with a sledgehammer from below. The side fences are heavy, wooden, about 4 in high and 8 in long, and heavy. So this giant articulated forklift is gently picking up on it. 2 guys are gingerly trying to tap it out from below and it still doesn't budge. Sergeant Einstein, for some reason, decides to lean over it and give it a good shake. Of course, it pops loose at that exact moment, launching the fence, and Sergeant Einstein, I swear 10 feet in the air, propelled by the tension of the forklift. The sergeant ends up with a huge gash under his chin, a broken jaw, and a few minutes of blackout. A forklift would just as soon hit you as look at you. Story 8. Not strangest thing so much as strangest person. He's like Dwight Schrute. Let's call him Mark. Mark wears shorts to work with sandals and socks every day. They are always the same. He also wears the same raggedy, hole-filled t-shirt. Mark has a file on everyone he works with. This is a well-known fact, and he will openly admit he has files on everyone. Mark regularly brings drinks in that look like alcohol. They aren't alcohol. He is just waiting for someone unsuspecting to accuse him of bringing in alcohol so he can report them for bullying. Mark has reported 10 people I know of for bullying. No action has been taken against any of them. Mark uses the printer almost constantly. I have no idea what he prints, but he prints easily over 100 pages a day and spends his breaks with these sheets and a highlighter. His job gives him very little cause to legitimately use the printer. Mark spends a lot of time in the canteen. If you go in while he is there, you will most likely be cornered and get a lecture about whatever is grinding his gears at that current moment. Mark has an issue with every single initiative the department tries to implement. Mark has the loudest, most obnoxious ringtone I've ever heard. His phone rings about 10 times a day, and he takes an exceptionally long time to answer it. Mark's desk is a catastrophe. It honestly looks like a hoarder's house. I have no idea how no one has complained. We work for the government. Mark is essentially immune to being fired. Also, in an old job, one of the bosses was caught giving it to a cashier in a tiny room upstairs. No negative consequences somehow. Story 9. Oh, let me tell you all about the men's room at the office I work at. I have seen the strangest things in there and continue to see new and stranger things every week. I don't have much time before I need to leave for work, actually, so I'll just share one of them for now. This was the first weird thing I saw in the men's room. I come out of the stall and head over to the long row of sinks to wash my hands. Standing at one of the sinks is a mid-20s, light-skinned Latino man in a nice suit. Beside him is a hefty bag full of ice cubes, the small kind, like you'd get from an automatic ice vending thingy. And what he's doing is reaching both hands into the bag, coming up with handfuls of ice, and holding them under the automatic sensor that turns the sink on. He stands there like this for about 10 seconds while it melts the ice, then repeats the process. He sees me see him doing this, looks over at me and does that, work, right? Wariaganado, kind of shrug, and continues on with his appointed work. If I can find this post when I get back from work, I'll write out some more. There's ton. Edit for more, and a couple weeks ago, I'm washing my hands at the sink, and a man comes out of the stall behind me with his pants and underwear at his ankles. This grown man proceeds to do the little kid shuffle all the way across the room to the sink, where he washes his hands, then pulls his pants up. Ass all hanging out and whatnot. Ugh, more to come. Just the other day, I was again washing my hands when an older gentleman enters the bathroom. He's dressed like me, not like the cleaning crew. He opens each stall, looks in, and after looking at all of them, he sighs dejectedly, washes his hands, and leaves. Story 10. Was working at a wedding reception and was replacing the soap in the women's toilets and walked in on the groom having sex with the maid of honor. Story 11. Worked at a gross-ass pizza shop in a college town that was open until 3 a.m. to get all the drunks. One night after a particularly heinous group of kids came in, we closed shop and cleaned up. I was checking the bathroom and realized it was locked from the inside. So I knock like crazy, but no one answers. I pop the lock with my pocket knife and come in to find 2 drunken male students passed out mid-romantic tryst. One guy is passed out cold on the crapper with another guy's face in his naked lap. Wake them up and send them away. Story 12. So, while I was working as a pool technician at my college's pool, I was basically a glorified janitor. We found that someone had started pissing directly onto the toilet paper rolls in one of the men's bathrooms. This was frustrating, and one of my fellow techs had to clean it up, which made me upset because he was a super nice guy and didn't deserve that. This continued for a while, and eventually it came up on my shift and I realized that I was unwilling to do this again. We obviously weren't legally allowed to have cameras inside the bathrooms, but we did have them outside so we could see who went in and out of the bathrooms, and the times it happened was a pretty dead time of the day. So I set up a watch for people to check that bathroom every half hour so we could narrow down the suspect list until we found him. I came into work the next day and we have this little log book that we keep so people can write maintenance, cleaning, or administrative stuff in so we could keep the staff informed about everything. And when I came in, someone had just written, "We got him." Turns out that some little kid from one of the swim programs had been going up there and peeing on the toilet paper and spitting on the mirrors. Didn't even realize those 2 things were from the same person because he wanted his friends to think he was funny. His coach didn't. He made the kid apologize in front of the whole staff and then made him help the tech clean up the urine-soaked toilet paper roll. Then the next day, he came back with his mother in tow, who was absolutely mortified by this. She made him apologize in front of the staff, again, forced him to write an apology note which was photocopied and put into the mailbox of every employee, and then, just to put the cherry on top, she bought cookies for the staff with money from his college fund. Obviously, it was just drops in the bucket of that, but it was the thought that counted. Oh, and we nicknamed this kid before we caught him, sort of a code word, so we knew who we were talking about. The Phantom Pisser, story 13. When I was working in a butchery, I was cleaning the food display. Like the food displays you see in a supermarket. No glass in front of the display. So it took me roughly 2-3 hours to clean that son of a Karen. When I was finally done and ready to go home, a drunk homeless guy waddles inside the store. I think nothing off it and go to the back of the store. Because unfortunately it wasn't the first time, and my supervisor always takes care of the problem. But not this time. This guy bends over to look at some of the meat and just falls over into the food display, face first. But instead of climbing out of the food display, he decides to lay down and just chill. Imagine my surprise when I walked back to the food display to close everything, and I see a homeless guy just chilling inside the food display. Had to throw away all the meat and had to clean the whole food display again. Story 14. An older homeless man would hide in the church under one of the 1,300 pews just before closing time and spend the night there. He'd get into the communion wine and sleep on a pew cushion, even in the midst of my practicing the organ at night. If the sexton came by and tried to rouse him, the guy would yell a resounding and go soundly back to sleep. I just let him be. A warm place to sleep on cold winter nights with a men's room near the front door. He did no harm. Story 15. I've got two, but they're only moderately strange. I work in a massive office wholly owned by one big finance company. One side of our building looks out on an apartment block. I used to work on the 4th floor, which was the perfect height to be able to see into all 3 floors of the apartment block through the windows. Our own windows are tinted on the outside, which means you can't really see if people are looking out or not. It just looks gray-brown. We had a strange ritual where when on a boring conference call or just taking a break, people would hang around a big open area that was an optimal viewing space for the apartments, and the goings-on of the residents of that apartment became, over time, an almost soap opera-style narrative shared around the people that worked on the 4th floor. I'd overhear conversations about, "Did you hear about the big fight that the lady on the left second flat had with her boyfriend? I think they broke up." I don't work on the 4th anymore, but I hope it's still going on. 2, there is a lady who works in our post room who is odd. She's in her late 40s and looks innocuous enough, but several people have caught her doing strange things. My personal example is that very early one morning, I wandered into the ladies' room to find her standing in front of the big mirror, skirt hiked up around her middle, hose-wash tights rolled down to her thighs, but underwear still in place, seemingly just staring at herself. She made eye contact with me in the mirror when I came in, then looked back at herself. I fled into one of the cubicles and sat there with my mind racing about what the heck she was doing. Story 16. Someone caught me. I was walking to my car for lunch. I was going to have hot dogs, so I was singing the theme to Cat Dog, an old Nickelodeon cartoon, but with the word hot dogs instead of cat dog, and kind of in the style of a smarmy lounge singer. An older lady I worked with got out of her car right as I was passing and asked, "What are you singing?" My mind went blank. I honestly couldn't think of any way to explain it to her. It's not like she would have watched Cat Dog. I just said, I don't know, got in my car and left. Story 17. I did some work experience at a music shop a few years back, and once this woman came in to talk to the owner, it looked like she had just been out of hospital, still with her little band on her wrist. She started spouting off a lot of stuff, but hit herself, how she'll be dead anyway in a few months. I'm guessing she had cancer. It was a strange thing to see. Just as she is about to leave, the owner and his friend walked up to her, put their hands on her head, and started praying in tongues. I just stared in bewilderment. I didn't even know that was still a thing. Story 18. I was repairing a forklift at a customer. This is inside a warehouse. Near my work area was a window looking out towards another warehouse. In between both warehouses was a road for truck entrance. It was a gloomy day, but I looked out the window and I see a guy outside by the other warehouse. Looked like he was on the phone and having a smoke. I carry on working. I look again, and dude looks like he's spanking his monkey. I'm like, WTF? I must be mistaken. I look again, and this mother ducker is walking with his pants down, beating his crap. This is freaking weird. I run back over to my forklift and I'm freaking out mentally. I'm laughing and thinking, who could I tell about this? I call dispatch and tell her what's up. As I'm talking to her, I look out the window again. This dude has his face plastered against the window, smiling at me. He waves at me. I'm telling dispatch, and she can't believe this. She's laughing too. I hang up. I look away, can't give this dude any satisfaction. He starts to play hide and seek. He moves to the side, and then back into the window, smiling. He does this 3 or 4 times and disappears. Finally, one of the warehouse maintenance guys shows up and asks how things are going. I tell him what just happened. He says he has heard of this guy, but never saw him before. He takes off in the golf cart and drives around the property. Doesn't see a thing. Freakiest crap I've seen in real life. Story 19. When I was 15, my mom worked for a nursing home and they implemented a new program to print out menus. My mom sucks at computers, so one day she decides I can work there under the table and help with the system. The place used to be a hospital, but when it became a nursing home, the wards were shut down. The closed wards weren't locked very well, so a lot of homeless people would sneak into the closed wards to sleep. When I was working for my mom, I accidentally went into the wrong door, and it was a closed ward. It looked like a scene from 28 Days Later. Someone literally just closed the ward and left the equipment, the beds, even some medical files from the 80s. What was even creepier is there were clothing in the hallway. Someone was clearly there recently. I noped the duck out and went to go find my mom. Story 20. I worked in a hotel as a front desk agent, and we had a new accountant who had moved to the area to work at the company. They let him stay in the hotel for a few months while he looked for a place to live. He was taking his sweet time to find a place. Eventually, after 2-3 months, the hotel cut him off, since it was busy season and the hotel needed the room available. One day I was in the back office and heard something odd. The engineering guy was back there with me, and he unlocked the accounting office. We see our accountant shuffling under his desk in the dark. He was sleeping under his desk. I like to think he was just sleeping because he was really weird, and I'd hate to think anything else was going on. And he tried to be all cool about it. That and my night auditor. Words can't describe how much I hated this woman. She was fat as all hell and would come into work late every night. I'm talking hours. And she always had fast food. One time I counted 13 to 14 soft tacos from Taco Bell in the bag she left in there. She had an awful personality too, which didn't provide any redemption for how fat and disgusting she was. She would pump milk at our supervisor's desk when she had her baby, leaving traces of titter milk everywhere. When she was pregnant, she would get offended if people didn't know she was pregnant due to her pre-pregnancy large size. Story 21. This was a few years back. I was working in retail as a supervisor. We had a nice couch in our break room. One day there was an issue with the schedule where 2 managers were scheduled to open on accident. So I come in at my usual time and headed to the break room to put my lunch in the fridge. I opened the door to one of our employees on top of the other manager naked and going at it. Well, he was my manager and told me I could go home for the day. Our top manager was out of the country, so I waited for the next day. I was still new to the job market, so I didn't know about HR reporting. And when I went in, I saw the girl run out of the manager's office, bawling her eyes out, and run out the door. Apparently, they both got fired because they were caught by security cameras just a few days earlier. But they had to go through the legal aspects before they could act on anything. It's so sad thinking about how they were going to tell their spouses they got fired. The weirdest thing, though, was that the girl was always really close to the manager she was screwing and said he was like a father to her. Yuck! And of course, they did it on our nice comfy couch, which ended up being thrown out the next day. Story 22. At a previous job, we had to let a guy go that just wasn't really capable of keeping up with the workload. He was let go, and one day one of us went into his desk drawers to find something. We discovered a collection of Post-it notes where he had drawn, or I should say, attempted to draw, little portraits of almost everyone in the office. He wasn't a very good artist, and we all got a good chuckle because it was impossible to tell who almost anyone was without the names he had written at the top of each one. He hadn't done them to be mean. We surmised that he likely just spent a lot of his time he was supposed to be working, drawing instead, but looking like he was working. We were talking there was like 50, 60 Post-it note portraits. Most people kept theirs for a while afterward. It was funny. Story 23. I worked in a shop that made sheet glass products like mirrors and tabletops. There was a guy that had been working there for a really long time before I'd started. He was nice, but a bit awkward. We all knew he wasn't the sharpest tool in the toolbox, but he worked hard and was easy to get along with. He had a habit of wearing Costco-style sweatpants every day and a white t-shirt, which isn't that odd. But when you work in a machine shop with no AC in Florida during the summer, you can see why sweatpants might not be the best idea. One particularly hot day, me and the couple coworkers were standing together talking when I noticed him across the shop with his hand in his sweats, really giving his ass a good scratch. I mean, really digging in there, right into his swamp ass. So I pointed out to the guys I was talking to, and they all moan in disgust. I immediately make a bet with my coworkers that he would smell his hand when he was done with his excavation. Once again, they moan in disgust and exclaim that he couldn't possibly do such a thing, so they take me up on the bet, assured of their victory. Surely the easiest $40 I've ever made. Story 24. Someone sawing a plank of wood in half while sat on it. A customer couldn't wait for 2 minutes for me to come and saw a plank down for him, so he put it on 2 trolleys, put a knee on it, and started sawing. Just as I arrived in the aisle, I saw him look up at me in panic as he realized he'd been caught in the act and had seen that he was about to face plant the floor as the saw broke through. Managed to grab a copy from the CCTV, though I never had the balls to put it on YouTube. The customer was the usual Big Ed that knew better than these hardware shop assistants, so he ate humble pie for a long time. Story 25. I got called down to the production floor at an old company. I was it, and I was asked to see if there was any damage to the computer by this wall that had water rushing out of it. I quickly shut down, unplugged, and moved everything before any damage. On the other side of the wall was a bathroom with a destroyed toilet. It was one of those high pressures one that bolt to the wall, and it was sitting on the floor. The pipe was pouring water into the wall and out through any small hole it could. The site security guy and I pulled the security footage and caught an awkward, scrawny guy and a huge 300 to 400 tall and easily girl sneaking into the bathroom. A few minutes later, they ran out, putting their clothing back on. With HR present, we questioned the guy, and all he said was, "Look at me, I get it where and when I can, because I don't usually get it." We asked him how, and he said that he sat on the toilet, and she rode him, and it broke the toilet off the wall. Poor guy, just got laid and fired in the same day. Girl never came back to work. Story 26. Did security at a cancer research center. This meant about once a week, we would have an older man in a baseball camp come in and try to demand some lab space and funding because he had discovered the cure for cancer, stevia AMD water. When security showed up, he'd snap from yelling to being chill and polite. As far as employees go, I was working the grave shift around 4 a.m. I heard weird sounds coming from a lab. Assuming a machine was malfunctioning or maybe even a homeless man had snuck in, I approached. It was just a middle-aged scientist practice deep-throating a test tube. She did it a few times before realizing I was in the room. We made eye contact, tube still in her mouth, and I just hoped out. Story 27. Came into the office early and thought I'd take advantage of the opportunity to be the first one to wreck the men's room for the day. As soon as I opened the door, I realized someone had already done so and had a great putrid effect. But whatever, my roommate in college was a heavy drinker with Crohn's disease, so I can tolerate crap stink, plus I gotta go, so I continue on in. Our work restrooms are laid out like airport style. Bank of sinks, followed by a bank of urinals and stalls. As I'm walking past the sinks, I hear water running. Stop mid-stride, look left and hear a gasp. I look over to see my female coworker, one leg up on the counter, shaving her veil, staring at me like a deer in the headlights. I too was frozen in place, staring awkwardly at the early morning men's room poop culprit, who I'd had a crush on for the better part of a year, shaving her pubes in a public restroom at work. I then chuckled, waved, and proceeded to the stalls. It's been over a month and she still won't look at me, though I've not told a soul, save the world of Reddit. Story 28. I work at a construction company doing accounting. These are things I've seen thanks to my boss. Wore his teenage daughter's jeans to work. Wore mismatched flip-flops to work. I went into his office, and there was a huge bloodstain on the carpet behind his desk, approx 302, with smaller patches around it. He'd quit taking his blood pressure meds because his blood pressure was good. This caused a week-long nosebleed that required several trips to the ear, a trash can in the car to bleed into, clothing covered in blood, and a tube running from behind his ear into his nose to keep from dripping. There was also blood all over the kitchen, but one of my coworkers cleaned that up before I came in. He asked me to help him with his computer. He forgot to close the adult site. A pair of red, high-heeled, knee-high vinyl boots in the storage closet. I'm the only woman who works here, and they weren't mine. Vomit on his shirt. He puked on himself in the car on the way to work. My boss is infamous. People ask for stories about him. It's great. Story 29. I didn't catch the guy, but I saw what was left over after we was caught. I worked at a really crafty job with tons of low-life people. We barely made above minimum, and they tested substances. They hired this junky-looking guy who apparently passed his initial test. He had marks on his arms and looked tweaked 24/7. He acknowledged this and said he was on the path to get clean again and just needed a job. So months passed, and this guy still looks like he did when he was hired. He smelled like substances and crap for weeks, and finally one day, he goes to use the bathroom and doesn't return for like an hour. Our manager goes to get him, and he pounds on the bathroom door and the guy tells him to go away. Finally, he kicks down the door, and the guy is snorting crushed up pills off of the toilet seat with his pants off. So, bring up that his pants were off? So now we know how he passed his tests. No clue what happened to him after that. Story 30. I was sitting next to this guy in an office meeting. He seemed to be taking lots of notes, so I looked to see what he was writing. He was drawing on the conference room table, like writing his nickname in a sort of bad graffiti style. He'd also drawn something that looked like a mushroom cloud explosion. I nudged him and mouthed, "What the duck?" He looked at me like, "What?" Then looked around the room and his face went white. He'd forgotten where he was in his mind, out of boredom, I guess, went back to school mode. He was about 20 or something, and this was his first office job. He hid the doodle, and we volunteered to tidy up the room after the meeting. We used alcohol hand gel to lift the ink, but couldn't do anything about the carving effect his penmanship had made. Luckily, no one ever mentioned it, but at another meeting, I saw him draw Jack Skellington on his arm. Story 31. We have a pond outside our office complex. A few of the koi had died, so we called the pond guy to come retrieve them. We really had quite bonded with the fish, so we were glad they would no longer be floating around with no dignity. The guy pulls up and we gather around the windows, we're several stories up, to see them off to the fishy netherworld. He hikes up his jeans over his knees, no galoshes, and walks into the middle of the pond. He begins retrieving the fish, but instead of going to the truck, he starts walking in the opposite direction. Then, he unceremoniously chunks the fish in some bushes. We started screaming and banging on the windows, but it was too late. Birds were on them immediately, and their fishy carcasses were ripped apart before our very eyes. I tell that to then say that the next time he was out, he legit pissed on a fence in front of 2,000 people in the surrounding office building. Unzipped and even gave it a good shake before he was done. Guy doesn't give a duck. Story 32. Guy who used to an open ceiling space above an unused conference hall at his workplace to pleasure himself and drink vodka. One day they had a meeting there, and he fell down on the table, pants around his ankles with all the debris, bottles, and adult mags because he weakened the structure with his weight or something. Story 33. I don't know if caught is the right word since it was me, but I worked at my mom's company as a summer job for a summer in college. There was a single bathroom, so just a toilet bowl and sink, and you could lock the door, no stalls. I went in and laid the most massive turd you've ever seen. Went from down the hole to touching the front of the bowl. I was pretty proud, and since they were unisex bathrooms and nobody would know it was me, I left it to be admired and threw my TP in the trash so as to leave an unobstructed view. I went into my mom's office and told her to check it out. She was disgusted and told me I needed to go flush it, but I refused. 10 minutes later, there's a big commotion going on around the bathroom. Everyone in the office, about 10 people, are crowded around the bathroom admiring my crap. They can't believe this came out of someone. Of course, only my mom and I know who was behind it. Story 34. When I worked at a big supermarket, a man in his 50s pulled down his pants and started pooping in a bookshelf of books. That was strange. Story 35. I work in a place where victims of crime often have to come personally to speak with employees. And most of these victims are very, very poor and can't take care of themselves. Anyway, the strangest thing I've seen here is once a colleague and I were speaking with an older woman who was sitting in the lobby, and she smelled so bad, like farm animals and poop. Anyway, we were doing our best to talk to her, and when we were done, she got up to leave, and we saw in the chair this weird pile of black sand. We didn't think much of it while we were walking her out, and just thought we'd clean the chair later when she was gone. So we walk over to the chair and take a look at this black sand, and it was moving. It was kind of neat to look at it moving all on its own at first, so we lean out heads in closer to get a better look. It wasn't sand. It was thousands of tiny insects, which we later found out were bed bugs. The lobby was instantly quarantined. Story 36. My boss was an odd person. He also drank a lot. He would often bring a can of beer into work and pour it into a coffee mug in the morning so he could drink it inconspicuously. One day, he ran out of clean mugs, so he got a large bowl, filled it with beer, and drank directly from the bowl. At this point, everyone had long since caught onto his antics and requested he just drink out of the can like a regular human being. Story 37. Many years ago, I caught someone stealing, hoarding office supplies, staplers, etc. The losing, misplacing of office supplies went on for weeks, and we could not figure out how we kept misplacing everything until once, when he was leaving for vacation, he told me I could go in his desk if I needed anything, a form to fill out or something like that. So, while he was on vacation, and with his explicit permission, I opened a file drawer and found all of our missing staplers, tape dispensers, etc. I knew it belonged to us, because some of it was labeled by us with our names, in our vain attempts to stop misplacing our office supplies. It was almost like he wanted to get caught. I showed it to the supervisor because she had missing supplies too, and nothing happened. I don't even remember if we got our stuff back. Looking back, it was annoying, but now I find it creepy. Story 38. This is both weird and illegal. I caught the head chef at a cafe, my first job, taking money out of the till during the quiet pre-breakfast hour. It was just a few coffees and early breakfast, probably $100 or so. When she realized I was watching her, she asked me not to put the next few orders through the till, so our boss would think we sold less than we did. She asked that I do it every day. I never did. The chef didn't like our boss, who was the best boss I've ever had, and I think she was stealing money for a while, trying to send the business under because her friend wanted to buy it. The chef's friend ended up buying it, and the place has gone downhill from there. Story 39. I work for a medical facility. At this time, we were not open to patients, just staff. Well, someone who isn't at the site consistently decided to allow some guy from outside to use our restroom. After 15 minutes, he hadn't come out yet. Then we noticed the light is off. So we started knocking. No answer. Doors locked. We finally called the cops because dude is unresponsive. It's been about 40 minutes and he's locked in the room with the lights off. We worked in a pretty bad area where we had a lot of homeless/substances users who hung around the building. Cops show up, they get the door unlocked, but it was a struggle because he was passed out up against the door. He had to be walked out. He was drunker than a skunk. At 10 a.m., same week, we had to break up a fight between 3 women in the parking lot. The only office that was open was Planned Parenthood. Wonder what happened there. Story 40. I walked into my manager's office. Door was open like usual, and didn't see her, which was odd. My office was right across the hall, and I hadn't seen her leave. I assumed I missed her leaving, and as I'm about to turn and walk out, I saw her foot sticking out from under her desk. I was confused, said her name, and got no response. Walked around her desk and she'd balled up taking a nap. I didn't know what to do, so I just walked out. Another time I was returning to my office and glanced in the window next to her door, that she usually never closed, and saw her with her foot propped up on her desk clipping her toenails. Gross, but whatever, at least her door was closed. However, she saw me walk by and called me in. Do you think she stopped clipping her toenails? The answer is no. I have so many absurd stories about this woman. Story 41. I worked at a car wash when I was 19. Every other person there was Guatemalan but me. I was the only white kid. Some of the nicest people I have ever met. With the language barrier came sometimes where they would be explaining some things that I couldn't quite understand, so they'd have to show me or pass it to a guy that spoke English better. Anyway, I showed up one morning early and one of the guys, Freddie, all gold teeth, hilarious as well, was standing in the middle of the car wash tunnel with a power washer, washing a pair of wooden high-heeled shoes, literal women's shoes, just standing there with a power washer drowning them with the highest pressure possible. When we made eye contact, he started to get angry and shout at me. This time, he wasn't kidding at all. When I asked the other guys what the purpose was, they were as confused as I was. Story 42. Pleasure himself to surf videos in a booth after hours at a pizza place. The worst part was that it was reported by someone walking by who saw it in the window, and then we had to watch it on the security tapes to confirm. Oh, the puns we wanted to make while confronting him, hand over fist, etc. Also, it set precedent for a rule we never thought we'd have to actually state during orientation. Story 43. Check kiting. So yeah, kind of boring, but it was the strangest. It was at a small credit union back before electronic clearing of checks was possible. One of the employees frequently made cash deposits and had corresponding check withdrawals coming out of her account. I totaled all her cash deposits for the year so far, I think it was February, and showed her that she'd deposited more than she and her husband earned in an entire year in just 2 months. I didn't have authority to fire her, so I reported it up to the CEO, who warned her. She ended up getting fired a couple years later when a surprise cash count revealed that she'd been borrowing from her cash drawer. Story 44. This was me, actually just the other day. I didn't realize until I was on my way to work that I was missing a contact completely. I thought it was just a skew or something. I work at a desk with 2 monitors, and I'm blind enough that I was going nuts with one eye clear and one super blurry. I decided an eye patch was the solution, so I got a large rubber band and a pack of Post-its, and boom. That being said, my boss walked past my office, stopped dead in her tracks and goes, "Is this real life?" And then she laughed as I told her the story and that my boyfriend was bringing my glasses. She made me promise not to see clients like that. Teal Dar, lost contact, rubber band, Post-it eye patch. Boss saw me and laughed. Story 45. I had received an after-hours call from someone that collocated with us and was having problems with one of their arrays. It was on and responding to ping, but wasn't serving data, nor were they able to manage it. So I threw on a shirt and some sandals and drove the 20 or so minutes into the DC, badged, bioscanned, into the building, then the DC itself. Opened the door and walked in, and there were at least 20 people in various states of undress and bondage getup that suddenly looked very surprised to see me. I kind of startled and started reaching for my phone to call the cops, and the CEO came over and told me to go on about whatever it is you need to do. He was really nice to me after that, lunches and beer and stuff. Story 46. Well, this was after the fact. Hired a guy for night janitor work, and I came in one morning and found him with his pants around ankles. Police ruled it accidental death by autoerotic asphyxiation. Story 47. When I was in high school, I worked at a preschool. I would go there directly after school and was always starving. There was a kitchen filled with snacks for the kids that I would eye every day. The cheesies and delicious Cheerios were mocking me. Eventually, I started stealing snacks and eating them in the bathroom where no one could catch me. I imagine that if a coworker were to walk in and see me sitting on the toilet jamming a handful of Kix cereal into my mouth, they would have been quite shocked. Story 48. Well, I used to work in a local restaurant as a dishwasher. The kitchen staff's bathroom was in the back by where we washed dishes and at the end of the cook line. One of the cooks, who happens to be a very good friend of mine, was in said bathroom with his pants around his ankles in front of the mirror with his junk tucked into a mangina. He didn't lock the door, and when one of the other cooks went to use the bathroom, he opened it wide, so no less than 8 people saw it. I don't think I ever laughed so hard in my life. This is just one of the many stories I have about him getting caught doing something strange or having something strange happen to him. Story 49. I worked at Burger King in high school. I was told by a manager to go grab something out of the walk-in cooler. When I walked in, the larger guy I worked with was in the middle of eating the small pre-packaged pies we sold at the time. There was cream on his face and a few empty boxes near him. All he said was, "Please don't tell." It was hard to look him in the eye after that. Story 50. I didn't catch him, but there was a guy who worked at my place who was overweight and was a heavy breather. It was always so hard to be in the elevator with him because he had this belabored, heavy, moist breathing thing going on. Also, he smelled a bit funky. So one day he crapped his pants. Straight up craps his pants. You could see the stain on the back of his pants. Did he go to the bathroom? No. Did he go home? No. He goes to his desk to work. They sent him home. Next day he comes in wearing the same pants. He had not washed them. They sent him home and cleaned out his desk for him. Story 51. We had a coworker that would pleasure himself in the men's restroom almost daily. We complained to HR about him because he would make it obvious, not hide what he was doing, be vocal about it, and the urinals had no partitions. HR was on his side and did nothing, told us to mind our own business. So we would avoid the restrooms when he headed that direction. And over time, people avoided him altogether, so he started down the path of, no one likes me, so they're picking on me. We had to attend a few HR classes because of him. They finally fired him on a technicality, and the general work atmosphere improved after that. Story 52. I had a boss who for some reason thought it cool to come in the mornings and rearrange everyone's desk. And by that I mean he would take all the stuff off of my desk and range it the exact same way on Jenny's desk and vice versa, but he wouldn't change the computers or files in the desk, so PPO would be turning on their computer and seeing pictures of someone else, cat, and just, where am I? What year is it? Whose cat is whose? Did I do this? When? I had one cow. When? Or get up and go to the next office over, because he thought he was in the wrong place. Story 53. Cute, shy, and innocent emo receptionist goes shopping on her lunch break and buys knee-high leather boots. Comes back, shows them to colleague. Creepy old guy who would have been diagnosed as autistic if he was born in the last 25 years. See the boots, grabs them, and deeply sniffs them from top to toe. Story 54. I had a coworker who was a really lovely guy. We all worked a cubicle desk job, and he was very helpful and unassuming. But for some reason, he would bring a whole bunch of homemade sandwiches, standard white bread with deli meat and cheese, from home and try to peddle them off to the rest of us during lunch. I think this happened for a week before HR talked to him and told him to cut that crap out. Story 55. Not so much someone, but when I first started my current consultancy role, I did a day a week at one of our clients' sites. Every single time I went there was a new drama. One week, the fire alarm was stuck on. Another week, someone used a foam fire extinguisher in a comms cabinet, frying half the racks. The one that sticks in my mind was when they found a giant double-ended dildo in the ladies' toilet. They literally passed it around the office, and most people were more concerned it was being used on the clock rather than being used in the office toilet or at all. Story 56. Stealing, sex, any substances you can think of, playing video games, as in a TV and console setup in the back of an SUV, setting up courses and racing personal or company vehicles through them. The dumbest thing we did at one site, looking back, was race a piece of crap security truck along a gravel road on a dike. We actually had a paint pen hung on a sign at the start of the dike to record top speeds after your run. Story 57. Well, I didn't see who'd done it, but yesterday I threw out an old lunch I had left in the work fridge, as I didn't end up eating it a few days ago, and I was out and got lunch there. Anyway, I noticed later in the day, the contents of the lunch container were in the bin, but someone has taken the container, and the container itself is just a disposable one from one of those 10 packs you get. Hence why I just threw it all out. I can't figure out why someone would want a crap-tier container which had spoiled meat in it. Story 58. We had this guy at work named Steve, and he loved Skidoos, and that's all he talked about. So we called him Ski-Doo Steve. Then once everyone found out how dumb he really was, we called him Stupid Ski-Doo Steve. Anywho, I was eating a fruit salad at my desk one day. Ski-Doo Steve creeps up behind me and says right in my ear, "My wife always buys me pineapples." I went to the bathroom and dry heaved. Story 59. I work at a restaurant, and we had a family and that had 2 girls. I went to the toilet part the way through my shift, and I could hear these girls in the cubicle next to me. Small toilets. From what I could hear, one of them was being sick, and they were both giggling. I could then hear the younger one say, "This actually hurts," then nervously laughing. Apparently, bulimia is the cool thing to teach your sister. Pretty ducked up. Story 60. When I was a manager at McDonald's, I was working an overnight shift. Obviously at 3 a.m. it was slow as hell, so as long as cleaning tasks were done, I let my people pretty much just chill. I walked into the manager's office and found one of my employees sitting at the desk with one of those portable DVD players. NBD, watch a movie. I didn't really mind. But then I glanced at the screen. Dude was sitting there, watching hardcore ducking adult film like it was a normal thing to do, story 61. I used to share my office with a disgusting woman who applied deodorant in front of me, regularly changed into workout gear. Without even turning around, burped and farted audibly, etc. One day, she removed her shoes and socks, vomit, and proceeded to spend nearly an hour not just clipping her toenails, but digging out ingrown toenails and blotting the blood with tissues that she asked me to hand to her. When she was finished, to put all the clippings into a Ziploc bag and put them in her purse. OMG, what was she gonna do with them next? Story 62. So, I wasn't the one to catch this guy, but funny story. My coworker buddy walked into one of the least used bathrooms. It's usually reserved for clients, and found a guy using a sex toy that was stuck to the wall. Oddly, the guy was so engrossed in it, he didn't even notice my buddy walk in. The guy in question was someone attending a week-long training session, so luckily he was out of the office in just a few days. Story 63, work it for a college. I suppose to install a computer for a GA. Got the keys from the dean's office, go to the door and knock on it. No answer, I can't see in. So I unlock the door and go in. As soon as I open the 3, he is sitting in the chair facing the computer with his ding-dong out. I installed the computer and leave, told my boss about it, we got a good laugh. Found out the guy's excuse was he was changing his pants. Pretty sure he wasn't here much longer after that. Story 64. I'll say what someone caught me doing. At my first job, I was 14 and I didn't really understand what a job was or what it really entailed. I worked at the grocery store next to my house, and on my first day, I was spinning a mop handle around like a fighting stick when my manager walked in. Ended up getting a, "I know you're young, but you can't be doing that weird crap here" talk. Stayed for about 4 years until I moved out. Story 65. We were having a slow day at the ice cream store that I used to run during the day, so I got boxes from the back and constructed an ice cream monster. I took the magnetic signs that say shakes and ice cream and whatnot off the wall and stood outside to coax people in. When I got to work the next morning, the owners were watching the security footage from that day, and one of them was laughing so hard that she wasn't breathing. Story 66. Worked in a factory, and the main machine was down, so usually we all go gather around and enjoy the air while they run around to find the problem. The company had hired a temp that looked strung out. He was standing there with us and started shaking his legs like he had an itch, but didn't want to scratch it, and shook a turd out from the bottom of his pants. Looked at us, shrugged, and walked off the job. Story 67. We once hired a salesman who would snack on raw ground beef. He'd just sit there at his desk with a pound of ground beef still in the styrofoam tub from the supermarket, pick a little bit off with his fingers and place it on a cracker and eat it. He'd go through about a half pound a day and was very proud of the fact that he'd never gotten food poisoning or tapeworms. Story 68. It wasn't me but my friend who started working at the place I used to work at. I guess the assistant manager who started a bit before I moved lost her house or something, so she was sleeping in the back room, which was very, very small. And she would also take naps in the bed store next door to us. The store was in a mall during the day, and while people would be shopping in the bed store. Story 69. I used to work at Walmart when I was in university. One time I was checking through a lady's shoes, opened the box to check the sizes, and someone had crap in the box, closed it up and put it back in the shelf. And it wasn't the first time it had happened. On another shift, a human turd was discovered in the aisle of the hardware department. What you gotta go, I guess. Story 70. I work at a restaurant with a deck, and one busy Friday night, and myself and this other guy we'll call Steve were hosting on the deck when a spider fell off the roof of the host stand and landed on Steve's arm. Steve then backs away from the host stand towards the middle of the deck while jumping up and down and trying to brush the spider off, all while yelling, "Damn!" Story 71. Didn't catch him. Found out about it later from the man himself. Working at a water park, there are circle filters built into the ground, and you can pull the lid off of them and look inside the filter. Well, at one of the pools, while no one was looking, this guy squats on the ground, lifts the top off, and pees in the filter through the hole in his shorts. Apparently, he does this often. Story 72. I didn't necessarily catch someone at work, but this story is close enough. At my job, we use a Samsung tablet to play Pandora. The other day, I went to use the internet on it, and when you open a new tab, it shows the most recent history in blocks. One of them was adult film, and I'm a little traumatized because I'm pretty sure it was my boss. Story 73. My buddy stores a toothbrush and an extra pair of socks on the couch in our private dining room. I've caught him brushing his teeth on several occasions. Story 74. Not so much caught as was told. Coworker was staring intently at one of the handheld scanner things at the register, and she pointed at it with no preamble and said, "Wouldn't it be weird to live your life as a scanner? Like this light at the top is your eye and the laser is your mouth and you just beep beep scan things all day?" Story 75. I work on a drill ship, and one day I caught a dude peeing over the side into the water. That, in and of itself, was a pretty normal thing that guys will do, but he then turns to me and says, "I was watching dolphins." Sure, dude, whatever you say. Story 76. There's a guy from my work that eats his lunches off of the bathroom floor. As in, he sets his bag of chips and sandwich in one of those plastic containers pre-made sandwiches come in on the bathroom floor of the stall as he is taking a crap and eats. I can hear the crunching of the chips. It is so frustrating. Story 77. Luckily, I wasn't caught, as I usually had the office to myself on Friday afternoon. But I called an ex to come visit me. After she had been here for a bit, I jokingly said, "I've never had sex at work," and she replied, "Isn't that why you called me over?" Well, it wasn't then. Let's just say nothing better than being paid to have sex. Story 78. One of my supervisors at a petroleum engineering firm was a really odd guy. On a hot day when everyone was particularly sweaty in the office, he would pour half a bottle of isopropyl alcohol into his hands and all over his face. He'd reek of alcohol for like 10 minutes until it evaporated, but I'm sure it cooled him off. Story 79. Not me personally, but my old boss told us how she had to fire one of the employees for watching adult film on a work computer with the volume on. She said he was arguing that there is nothing wrong with watching adult film at work, and this is just discriminating against. He was let go that day. Story 80. I work in a fairly formal office environment for a big international corporation. There used to be a guy who would sit at his desk, not cubicle, not office, in our open concept office building and shave. As in, he would plug in his Norelco electric razor, turn it on, and booze his face at his desk, like multiple times a week. Story 81. I'm a lifeguard. We have a slide at our indoor pool. I once walked in after hours to do some paperwork, and two staff were playing on the slide. No water was running with their dog. The dog was running up and down the 50-foot slide, chasing the two of them. Story 82. A coworker was terrified of abuse and would poo in garbage bins when working after hours on her own. She's from India and wouldn't take her poo to the loo. My boss set up video cameras to figure what was going on. There's a video of her somewhere. Yes, she is hot. Story 83. I work in the corporate office of a market research company. Every couple of weeks, there is a new smear or blob of crap on the stall wall in the middle stall of the women's bathroom. It's not like we have a public restroom. Some grown woman is getting crap on the wall. Story 84. My old manager walked in on the maintenance man hitting the general manager from the back in the full windowed office at Burger King. The maintenance man then threatened my manager because apparently the general manager and maintenance man were both married to other people. It was a lot of wild drama. Story 85. I came home from a long day of work to find my toaster on the counter with toaster strudel all cooked and ready to eat. I didn't have any toaster strudel in my house at the time. I still have no idea how that happened. Story 86. When I worked at Arby's, I constantly caught my coworker stuffing bread into his mouth, literally only the top of the bun. Rush around the corner. There he is with his cheeks full and trying to chew it as fast as he can before our manager sees him. Story 87. My coworker caught me with no top on. I work in an isolated part of my Bolden Inn alone so often that I thought I could get away with changing my shirt. Sitting right at my desk, it was a nude bra. I probably looked like I was potentially totally naked. Story 88. Once I was passing by and see one of my former employees melt ice in a glass of water by running hot water. Mind you, she wasn't a direct subordinate. So when her supervisor embarrassingly says to me, "She has a good heart," I try my best not to bust out laughing. Story 89. The operations manager was stealing one of my cheese string from the fridge, and I called him out on it. "Stealing my cheese, eh?" He threw it back in and was like, "Oh, I thought they were mine. I brought cheese." No, duck, you know exactly what you were doing. Story 90. Not me personally, but I used to work for a prominent government contractor, and one of my co-workers was caught and later arrested for discreetly filming men using the restroom at a large government facility. Apparently, he was uploading them to some fetish website in a dark corner of the internet. Story 91. Had a really weird guy remove all of the pesticide flags from the lawn and hide them in the trunk of his car. We just assumed he was using them to mark the graves of the people he had killed and buried in the backyard of his home. Story 92. My uncle likes to tell the story of his wife finding a wallet in their oven. Nothing in it, just a normal black wallet. No one in their family had lost one, and they still have no idea where it came from. Story 93. Worked with this scary old broad about 30 years back, and she took an obscene phone call. Unlike most people, who would have told the caller to piss off and hung up, so began to get into it. Kinda scary for a Tuesday afternoon. Story 94. Dishwasher at a former restaurant job would eat people's half-eaten food that came back when we bust the tables. Half-eaten crab cakes, steaks, pasta, soup, you name it, he ate it. would pick it up right off the plate with his hand. Story 95. I work in a place with sally ports. One time, one of the workers was apparently in there, longer than she cared to be en route from the company kitchen with an armful of little milk carton. She started screaming bloody murder and started chucking her milks around. Story 96. A wooden magnet in the air duct. It has a picture of a panda bear and the saying, "When I works hard. When I sits loose. And when I thinks, I falls asleep." Story 97. I walked in a common office area and caught a student worker pleasure himself. I went straight to the boss, and when confronted, the student claimed he was doing substances and was hiding it from me. He said he was not pleasure himself. Story 98. One time, my boss suspected someone was stealing from the cash register but didn't have any cameras installed, so he spent the night hiding in the ceiling. Never caught the guy, but someone else caught him a few weeks later. What's the most hilarious thing you have seen at your workplace? Story 1. I used to be an assistant manager at a video rental chain here in the Midwest. Yes, we still have quite a few, and some of them actually do quite well. Well, our video store had this cool, weird thing about. In a store that had the word family in the title, and primarily rented the latest blockbusters to be released on DVD, had a back room that you had to be 18 to get into. In the back room were hundreds of adult films you could rent. Well, these video stores were almost always located in low-income neighborhoods. That's how they made their money. They rented in neighborhoods where people typically didn't have internet or cable and only had DVD players. Because crime was rampant in the area and we were frequently robbed, we had cameras all over the store, including the back room, that broadcasted to the front counter so that us employees could watch the customers. Sorry for all the backstory, but it's essential to the plot. This kid walks in one day and he was wearing a backpack. I know this kid, I have seen this kid before in the store. This kid has been asked to leave the store for stealing candy before. It was only me and my manager at the time working. I lean to him and I say, "Hey man, keep your eye on this kid. We have had problems with him before." This kid had a different agenda this particular day. He just turned 18 and was heading to the back room for the first time. He gets in the back room and we are all watching him on the camera screens up front. Now, the way the back room is set up is that all the DVD display cases that the movies would come to us in were set up in front of the actual discs. So basically the box with the title, actors, synopsis, pictures were on display up front, and the actual discs to watch the movies were in lock boxes behind the display boxes. So you could read the display boxes if you want, but if you wanted to rent the movie, you had to bring the lock boxes up to the front for us to check out for you. This kid gets to the back room and just starts grabbing movies off the shelves like crazy. My manager and I are sitting there like, "Okay, here we go again. Do you want to call the cops or should I?" But then we notice he actually isn't stealing any of the discs. He's grabbing the display boxes. We could always print more of those, so we didn't really care, but we'd still probably call the cops. We decided to let this develop a little. Well, he starts lining up all the display boxes for these adult films on the ground in these neat little rows. He creates a little 9x9 quilt of adult DVD cases on the ground. Then he proceeds to lay down on the ground in front of them, take out his member, and start do it. My manager and I start dying laughing. We couldn't believe it. My manager's like, "Dude, go tell him to stop." I was like, "No way, man. This is all you. You're the boss." So my manager reluctantly goes back there and opens the door to the back room. Meanwhile, I have the pleasure of watching all this unfold on the cameras up front. As soon as the door opens, the kid looks up at him mid-stroke and freezes. My manager freezes. They lock eyes and just kind of stare at each other for a moment. My manager totally chokes and doesn't know what to say. So he just says, "We'd feel more comfortable if you didn't have your book bag back here. Could you leave it at the counter?" I guess we both assumed that the encounter would startle the kid enough for him to just leave. Wrong. This kid, as casual and shameless as you could possibly be, walks up to the front counter, drops his book bag off, and then returns to the back room to finish what he started. We couldn't believe it and called the cops. He never came back after that. Story 2. There were a few pretty amazingly funny things that happened at my old jobs, but I think I've got it down to the top one for each one. Back in the early 2000s, I worked at a small-town grocery store. The event in question happened in the summer of 2004, just after one of the new supervisors had graduated high school. Oftentimes, when we worked together, it was usually nothing but laughs. Acted with the kid in a bunch of musicals when I was in school. I graduated the year before, so we had pretty good comedic timing. One night, we're working on closing duties early, so we can just bolt at 9:05 when the alarm gets set. When I noticed the smelliest family in town waddling through the parking lot, at this point, I did a quick supervisor red line to get his attention. He hurries behind the courtesy desk and grabs the biggest can of air freshener we had, normally reserved for when I had bad gas, and peeks out from behind the wall like a soldier in a foxhole, waiting to pull the pin and toss a grenade. Soon as they stench their way in, the Addams family makes their way to the produce section as Operation Stink Screen goes into action, and our stellar hero of a supervisor sneaks behind them as they toddle their way through the store, oblivious to the fact that he has this spray bottle at full throttle. Thankfully, I had enough time to recover from my spastic laughing fit to check their entire order through and get their smelly asses out ASAP. We laughed for a solid hour after they're left, too. Spent nearly a decade working at my last stop, food and beverage, at a fairly large Midwestern casino. And for the brief time, I was a supervisor on third shift, the dirt-ducking worst most nights. I did take great joy in kicking people out because they decided to argue with my bartenders over the parameters of being cut off. Bartenders were right 100% of the time. My favorite had to be the first one. It was just myself and the other rookie supervisor were called out to speak with a young gentleman because he may have accidentally drank enough to stun a moose and was getting quite obnoxious. He had the "My daddy is a lawyer" starter kit on, polo shirt, khaki shorts, sandals, and backwards hat, with the douchey attitude to come with it. I had the rookie talk to the dude first while I spoke with the bartender. We figured it was more efficient this way. When I saw Douche Skywalker getting a little more animated, I decided to flag down the nearest security guard. Now this guard was one of my favorites because he actually possessed a personality. I lost it when the following exchange went down. Drunk douche. Bro, just let me stay. I won't drink anymore. Guard, I'm not your bro. To keep up appearances, I had to duck behind a few of the taller guards who had gathered into position to kick the dude out at my request, and had myself a good laugh. Bonus from the casino. Same time frame as the Douche Skywalker incident. Not sure what lead up to this moment, but the rookie supervisor had me just losing my mind laughing, to the point where I was stomping. In the hallway, random security guard strolls by and says, "What are you stomping on?" Rookie super blurts out, "D's nuts." I was in the fetal position trying to not piss myself at this point. Story 3. I work in a trendy spot in New York City. We had a new hire. Middle-aged, relatively husky guy who joined the engineering team. He made a huge fuss about getting to sit on an exercise ball instead of a chair like everyone else, and it obliged. He's had the thing like 2 days when he's headed back to his desk with a full cup of joe, and he plops himself down on the ball, and boom! It explodes, and this goober is lying on the ground, wailing in a mess of his own making. Story 4. The CEO sends a cryptic email saying he has a big announcement. He's an older dude, so people immediately start worrying that he's either announcing his retirement or announcing the sale of the company or something like that. At the time, we were having a great year, but people were still freaking out that maybe he sold and now our futures are in jeopardy. Everyone shuffled into the conference room where he's there with a microphone. There are champagne and candy on a table. He goes into this spiel about how our best year ever was, and he couldn't be more proud, and he heard the retirement rumors, but it won't be anytime soon. So there's 100 people in this room like, okay, so the tension was unreal. Please help yourself to some candy. Also, the executives and I are going on a Caribbean cruise to celebrate. Join me in congratulating them on this great success. What followed was the most tepid, dumbfounded round of applause I have ever heard. I felt like I was on an episode of The Office. The fun-sized M&Ms were good, though. Story 5. At a funeral I was working, I watched the estranged mother of the deceased try to threaten and intimidate the young widow. Thing is, Mom didn't speak English, and the widow didn't understand a word of Spanish. So while Mom was telling her how she was going to pay for taking her son away from her and from his country, and how she'd make her life miserable, the widow was just smiling and nodding. The mom was getting increasingly frustrated and finally got out something like, "You, meet soon." The wife took it in a very different way, scooped the mom up in a big hug, thanked her for that, and said she loved her too. The mom gave up and stormed off. I managed to keep my face straight long enough to pull the deceased's brother aside and have a word. The brother rolled his eyes and assured me that he'd have his mom on the first plane back to Spain, and I retreated to the prep room for more tissues and an extended fit of giggling. Story 6. After services one cold winter day in the church where I'm organist, there was to be a baptism. The mother noticed steam rising from the baptismal font. She said, "Why is that baptismal water steaming?" To which the minister replied, "Oh, it's nothing. We boil the hell out of the holy water to be sure the sin is gone." People were still laughing after the baptism as they left church. Story 7. Happened years ago at my current job. So there's this one woman who's a bit of a Karen in general, but really took a hating for me for reasons still unknown. Anyways, where I work is a job that lends itself pretty easy to alcohol abuse. Doesn't help that the office at the time was literal pissing distance from a bar. I mean, no joke. Some of us would go over there on break, get drinks, then go back to work. So this chick gets super, and I mean super drunk one day, and mouths off to me after I've had a bad day. I know she's drunk, and I know the boss would kick her ass out of there for it, so I egg her on. More and more, escalating until it's a literal shouting match, and she has enough of it and goes to sit down. Well, this Karen is so drunk she misses the chair by a good foot and sits full force down on her ass. Boss finally sees what's happening on the cameras, calls in, and orders someone to drive her home. She's still employed today, but in a different office. Second one, new office, new door system that uses magnetic locks. There's a motion sensor inside that you need to trip before the door unlocks. Well, there's a slight delay on the system itself that was never able to be fully eliminated. About a week after it was installed, and we were still getting used to it, a girl had to run out to her car really quickly for something, totally forgetting about the delay on the magnetic lock. Story 8. I work at a company houses 2 data centers, and we lease racks out to customers so they can bring in their equipment, and we provide the connectivity, cooling, power redundancy, and monitoring. One day an alert pops up on our monitoring platform for one of the customer's server. We're not allowed to do anything, so we call the customer and they send one of their techs over. I go to meet him and let him into the data center. He's in there for about 3 hours. Finally, he calls and tells me the job is done and asks if I can escort him out. I go down there and I find this guy next to his rack, completely butt naked. He sees me, puts his clothes back on, closes the rack, packs his equipment, and tells me to escort him out. I kept a straight face the whole time, and I never questioned him. I check out the surveillance camera, and as soon as I let him into the data center, he removes his clothing, pulls out his laptop, and begins troubleshooting the issue for 3 hours straight. And our data centers are cold because of the cooling. Story 9. I worked at a pretty large corporate company that had a dedicated word processing department that would type and format our reports. As you can imagine, the people who worked in the WP department were a little OCD about things and were under constant deadline, so really stressed. But there was one guy in the WP department who always had a smile on his face. Imagine Mr. Rogers, right down to the knit cardigans, always soft-spoken, always attentive to details and friendly about edits. A model employee, never a negative word. This kind of guy would schedule with his boss to take afternoons off to feed the homeless and volunteer at church, but feel bad because he was leaving work an hour early. So basically, the nicest guy on earth. So one day, someone sends out a mass email to like 200 people in the office, offering to sell some baseball tickets because they couldn't get to the game. So naturally, some guys see all about how they can't go, etc. After about 15 minutes, the emails stop. No biggie. And a few hours later, someone emails the whole office about donuts in the break room. And then there was 15 minutes of CC alls about, oh, my diet, and I call jelly Z, etc. And then they stop. And then a few hours later, someone emails that they are selling Girl Scout cookies and donating money that they make to soldiers in Iraq. Oh, that's nice. But Mr. Rogers and WP had had enough. Stop mass emailing everyone. No one cares. I have enough emails to go through without reading this crap. Story 10. I had to work an opening shift at Safeway one time, and I walked into the back area to throw some cardboard in the baler. I guess the night crew got bored that night, because 2 of them were duct taped to the walls in the back, and the other guys had a pool going on of who would stay up the longest. I was way too tired to deal with that crap. Story 11. Had dinner at Trump Tower in ratty jeans and a sweatshirt because no one actually communicated with one another. I worked at a digital media startup that ultimately failed for a lot of reasons, but overall, it was miscommunication. They tried to foster a team attitude in that if the coffee area was a mess, you clean it. No job was beneath anyone. We all help each other between discussions about what was going into our eventual Wired magazine profile, and because why not? For a little over a week, we were being told by the HR receptionist graphic designer that on one specific Wednesday, not to wear our good clothes because we were all going to help move some desks and cubicle walls. At the same time, the CEO kept telling us that he had a surprise in store for us. On the Wednesday in question, I showed up to work in a Chicago Bears 1985 World Champion sweatshirt, some ratty old jeans, and work boots. My other coworkers were dressed similarly, and we moved stuff. That evening, we were trying to get our regular work done. The CEO calls and has us gather in a conference room. He tells us that there's a limo waiting for us downstairs to take us to dinner. The limo takes us to Trump Tower, where we ate dinner in jeans and t-shirts. The CEO was mortified and ranted about it for the life of that startup. We all, as a team, thought it was hilarious. Story 12. I was working for a company making glass cabinets, shelves, etc. For many applications, we used a UV-activated glue that when dried was stronger than the actual glass. Operations manager hated quality assurance manager. One day, QA manager calls OP manager incompetent in production meeting. QA manager was a real a-hole. End of the day, everyone goes home. I'm staying late on a design project. OP manager walks by carrying a bottle of UV glue. I say some smart-ass comment like, "What are sleeping here now?" And he just keeps walking with this focused look on his face. I go home. Next morning, I come in and QA manager's having a blowout. He's ducking pissed about something. He's screaming all the way from the other side of the plant, and I can hear him. I walk back there to see what's up. Apparently, the QA manger had this motorcycle engine he had been working on as like a hobby. He had it in the back because he was using some of the tools we had. Someone had beautifully and completely sealed it, sitting on a slab of wood inside a big UV-bonded glass display case. And this was some thick glass. I'm talking 3/4-inch crap, perfectly and permanent sealed. The only way to retrieve the engine was to take a sledgehammer to the whole thing, which made a real mess. QA manager had to do it himself. Technically, nobody was caught because there were no cameras and no witnesses came forward. Story 13. I work in the Navy. I have a shore command stationed at a hospital as an IT, or, well, now K-200. When I got here, there was a surplus of Nerf guns. I didn't know why, but there was a lot of pistols. One day, a coworker snuck into our boss's shop with a few, maybe 3 or 4 pistols, and started shooting up the place like something out of an action movie. He quickly ran away as our chief walked in. From the other room, we hear, there was a firefight, and then almost immediately, our LPO walked in with a Nerf Gatling and unloaded it on him. She then said, "Don't bring what you can't take, sucker." It was a new experience for me, having been there a week. It was pretty hilarious. Story 14. It is a consultant here. I currently work for a demo plant hire firm. One of the not-so-bright yard workers was breaking down some reclaimed materials next to a skip. As he's chopping away with his little axe, he notices a can of expanding foam, brings it towards him, and for some strange reason, he decides to hit it really ducking hard with the axe. All I heard was a loud bang and a lot of swearing. He walks out from behind the skip, noticeably expanding due to sheer volume of this stuff he had on him. He looked like a very confused orange marshmallow man. Story 15. These are all stories about the same girl that worked in my office. I personally only witnessed one of these, but was told the rest by various coworkers. This lady worked in the call center, where we took calls for various companies, one being North Yorkshire Fire. We are in England. When the phone rings, it shows the client name, and in this instance, came up NY Fire. Bless her, she obviously got confused because she answered the phone New York Fire. Those in earshot struggled to answer our next lot of calls through laughter. As she didn't live too far away from the office, she tended to walk to work. One time a coworker saw her walking and stopped to offer her a lift the rest of the way, to which she obliged. She asked if he could drop her off at the front of the building instead of going around to the car park, which he did. As soon as she got out of the car, she started to sprint full speed away from him and the office. Around the business estate our office is based are quite a lot of bushes. One afternoon, as some of the guys were walking home, they were startled by this lady jumping out of the bushes and then running off. They thought she had been getting changed in the bushes. There were bathrooms in the office she could have got changed in. Story 16. I work in a hospital lab, and on a Monday morning I came in and saw this email. To whom it may concern, I had 2 cupcakes and put them in the core lab break room refrigerator last night on the evening shift, and someone ate one of them. The cupcakes were for my dogs, and they contain raw meat. If you ate the cupcake and don't feel well, please see a doctor. I don't want you to get sick and end up with E. coli or salmonella. Story 17. Off the top of my head, we were having a red, white, and stew potluck in my office yesterday. Someone brought in venison stew and marked it Bambi's dad. Story 18. When I worked in retail, we did trolley jousting. That was so funny, but now in hindsight, also quite dangerous. I am surprised no one was seriously injured, considering how many crashes there were. When I worked in a bar, we had a huge fight breakout. I went to intervene, but 3 bouncers had already separated it and were desperately trying to keep this massive rugby player type guy. I called for reinforcements on the radio system, which contacted all bouncers tuned into the pub watch scheme. Within seconds, the front door swings open and I am expecting big, burly men with SEA badges. Nope. Standing in the doorway, assessing the scene like a bad mother ducker is the taxi marshal. He is the weediest guy out of all of them, yet he just straight up legs it and dives into the fight and gets lost in the press of flailing limbs. I will never forget how much my sides hurt after seeing that. Story 19. I worked at a pharmacy that made chemotherapy for a cancer care clinic. It was really laid back most of the time. We always had 70s and 80s music playing. There were only 4 of us: the pharmacist, the tech, and 2 patient care coordinators. Well, one really busy day, we were all kind of running around to keep up with the demand, and we noticed the radio station we had on, Sirius XM, seemed to be playing the same 15 seconds of a song over and over. It did that sometimes, so we would have to refresh the page. But this time it was so busy no one did, and no one noticed until it had been looping for 4 hours straight. I just remember the other care coordinator asking me if this song had played recently, then it hit me. I remembered seeing Hot Blooded by Foreigner when I first turned the station on at 8 a.m. For 4 ducking hours, the first 15 seconds of that song played on loop and no one ducking noticed. Even after the 2 of us noticed it, we couldn't say anything because the other 2 were still busy, and we actually had to be quiet because of a customer. Trying to contain our laughter, after realizing that was one of the hardest times I ever had to laugh. Story 20. My friend, her mom, and I worked at a convention center. Our morning work was done, and the doors to the show we were working weren't open yet. So we walked around to kill time. My friend's mom spots an electric wheelchair scooter. She gets in, starts to drive it, and rams right into a huge pyramid display of boxes. No one is around to see. So we bolt from that spot like the cops are coming. The three of us are laughing at her crash and talking about when someone finds the scene of the crime. My friend cannot get it together, and then starts running for the bathroom. She didn't make it in time. In her words, she piddled a little in her pants. This was our 10th day working in a row, 12 plus hours per day. Being overtired makes things more hysterical, at least in my experience. Her mom is a riot and master prankster. There's a ton of stories I could tell just from working with her. The funniest story, including her, is from outside of work. Hands down her best prank and an awesome way of getting revenge at the same time. If anyone cares to hear it, I will gladly share. Story 21. I worked in a small office, at most 6-8 people at a time, and we did mainly programming, website design, graphic design work. One day, a bunch of us discovered the 2048 game and started playing. We got really competitive, and a lot of us would play and try to get the highest score, screenshot it, and write it on the glass door with the first 2 letters of our name. Somehow, by the end of the month, the entire glass door was filled with numbers and initials, but everyone was too lazy to clean it up. We had a fair few people, clients, friends come over, and everyone asked about the numbers and letters. We'd make up a different story each time. It's the master key. It unlocks any security system at all time. It's the hexadecimal code of a new AI we wrote that always beats a human being in Candy Crush. The numbers and letters are part of an initiation code to a secret hackers club. It was a funny inside joke. Story 22. I used to work in an egg factory. One day I walked into the washroom to poop and sat down in a stall. I hear an abundance of grunts and splashes from the next stall. Sounds like whoever in there is laying some serious cable. He finishes up before me, and I see through the crack in the door that it's my buddy Garrett, who I had gone to Burger King with before the shift. So Garrett washes his hands and leaves, while I remain on the stall trying to squeeze out some more feces. Garrett must have really disagreed with those onion rings, because not even 5 minutes later, he rushes right back into the stall, plops down, rips the loudest, wettest, nastiest fart ever, and proceeds to continue crafting his guts out until after I left in another 5 minutes. Needless to say, a lot of us made fun of Garrett for that incident. Story 23. I work in a large ER that treats quite a few psychiatric patients. Many of them have lost their sense of social boundaries. I learned this when I saw one of them having sex with their so in the hallway. They were both very large and ignored our stern requests to stop. They were also very loud and quickly became a spectacle, as all the other patients looked out of their rooms to see what the commotion was about. I was not about to intervene at all. Security ended up having to separate them. I wish I could have unseen it, but it's still a running joke. 3 years later, story 24. I am a commercial electrical foreman and was sent out to help another foreman because his crew was too big for him. He asked if I would take his son, a 22-year-old kid who had just spent 3 years in prison, on my crew and teach him something. This kid was working with me, taking care of some loose ends one day. I was hooking up some equipment and he was strapping some overhead conduits. To reach them, he was standing on the incoming city water pipe, a 36-inch main of 40-degree pressurized water. I was just finishing up some wiring when I heard this really strange sound, halfway between a gasp and a wail. I looked up to see the kid, this insane look of surprise on his face, frozen in place as water shot up the leg of his pants and coming out from the neck of his shirt. It looked like his head was popping out in the middle of a huge crystal bowl. Evidently, thanks to his baggy pants, the cuff of the right leg caught a relief valve. Story 25. Teaching first grade. Had a sweet troublemaker named Jackson. Cute kid, but accident-prone and almost always in trouble. One day, Jackson has an accident in his pants. It happens. Kids are only 6, and we keep a supply of emergency clothes for just this type of situation. So I get the child some clean clothes and take him to the bathroom, where he goes in and changed. Unfortunately for everyone, our principal decides to have a fire drill right in the midst of Jackson's change of garments. To his credit, Jackson knew what to do during a fire drill, and he proceeded to do it at full speed. You guessed it, a naked boy ran streaking through the hallways in a very determined effort to get out the door. I managed to catch him before he got too far, shoved him in the office with the principal and the clean clothes, then got my class out safely. Jackson graduated high school last year, and we still laugh about the fire drill. Story 26. Probably not the funniest thing, but the first thing that comes to mind. I'm a bartender and formerly a barback. While barbacking one night, I saw some younger people, of legal drinking age, but not by much, order a round of tequila shots. The bartender garnished each with a lime, but it was busy, and since they didn't ask for a salt shaker, it was not provided. They look around and see one of these which is clearly a sugar shaker, and go for it. Everyone hits sugar, shot, lime, and it dawns on each of them that it is definitely not salt and not effective against rail tequila. The reactions were pretty good. As it turns out, I recognized two of the people and came around the bar to say hello immediately after all of this happened. Other than frequently seeing people do drunk, fumbly things, the best is when we have to kick people out for smoking weed on the premises and they start thanking us instead of apologizing. If it were legal here, it'd be great, but it isn't yet. Story 27. Guy came in, asked to borrow our phone. He then proceeds to start setting up substances deal right in front of us. We have a new policy regarding people using our phones now. Story 28. Here you go. I worked at a clinic X-ray lab area next to the urgent care. I worked closing with one specific phlebotomist and X-ray tech, and we are bored. We also always had fun when we all worked together. We decided to go to that stupid "What's Your Rap Name" website and type in our names and some people we all know too. It spat out some hilarious names, and we were literally crying, laughing. One of the Ma's from the urgent care comes over to our area to see what we were laughing about. We showed her the site, and she laughed and decided to show it to the other urgent care employees. This is where it's stupidly funny. You see, the doctor on that night was black. His name is Leonard. They type it in, and then it's crazy laughter erupting from the building. The site called him Lenny the Cracker Killer. I don't know if we were just tired, delirious, or what, but OMG, it was the best night ever at that job. Story 29. I used to work as a janitor in a student union at a public university to pay for tuition. Because it was a public university, the public is welcome in any of our facilities so long as they don't cause any trouble. Of course, this meant that the homeless frequented the student union. One night, I go to clean the downstairs bathroom. There is a homeless man in there with what looked like a pretty bad infection in his mouth and gums. He lost teeth. There is blood everywhere. He leaves, but I'm tasked with cleaning it up. Story 30. A skinny little junior high-aged kid was spotted trying to swipe some video game cartridges and was approached and confronted by a mid-20s undercover loss prevention guy. Kid hauls off and punches the LP guy in the balls, and he lets out this loud noise that sounds like yowp and drops like a rock. Kid shoves the games down his shirt, runs out the door, hops on his bike, and rides away like the wind. It happened so fast that the kid was long gone by the time the LP guy could stand up and hobble out the door after him. He staggered around outside the door for a minute, looking for the kid, and realized he was nowhere in sight. I always thought it was a really bad idea to keep the video game cartridges right by a door. I had to duck down behind my register counter when the LP guy came limping past my department on his way back to the security office because I didn't trust myself not to laugh out loud. Story 31. I'm a subcontractor and went on a service call to repair a guy's garage door. Had to do a temporary repair and told him I'd be back in a week with parts to complete the job. When I got there, I noticed that he had his arm in a sling. I asked what happened, and he said he fell off his motorcycle. So I was like, glad you're okay. Could have been a lot worse. A week later, I knock on his door, and he's taking a while to answer. I'm thinking he's not home. 60 seconds later, he finally opens the door. This time on top of the sling, he's in a full leg cast. I couldn't contain myself and started laughing out loud. First time I've ever laughed at a customer. I'm usually very professional. I asked him what happened. He said he fell off his bike again. I told him, dude, you might want to take up another hobby because from the looks of it, riding a motorcycle may not be your thing. Story 32. I was new at the job. I'm sitting next to this guy, but I mostly keep to myself because I don't know anyone much yet. The guy is sitting in his chair and leans down to open a drawer in his desk. As he does, he sneezes and in doing so, slams his head into the desk. I didn't know how to react. This was one of the first interactions I had with the guy, but it was too ridiculous not to react. I was too shocked to even laugh about it then. I just said, did you seriously just do that? It was like the dumbest thing I'd ever witnessed. And I was thinking, these are the people I'm gonna be working with. He just laughs it off and says, ha, yeah. Story 33. I actually caught a guy crafting on the floor. Outside the toilet, he hadn't locked the door. He made scary eye contact with me, so I left and never said a word about it. Story 34. I worked in a law firm that hired one of the most vapid, vacant women I've ever met. Two of the more notable memories of her. One, the firm previously owned 3 floors of an office building, but at some point in the past opted to rent out and ultimately sell the top floor. That said, they did keep one small room up there, which they dubbed the war room. They kept trial exhibits, a skeleton, etc., up there and used it mostly for trial prep. When Vapid Girl learned we had a war room, she legit thought the president would come there to declare war, too. Similarly, our file clerk had been doing some annual shredding in the basement storage room. He came upstairs once to complete a task, then told the girl he was going back to the dungeon. Her face screwed into a frown and she asked, "We have a dungeon?" I'm fairly certain after those 2 incidents, the file clerk tried to convince her of some more random crap. Story 35. I worked in collections for almost 4 years, so I've seen some funny stuff. The one that takes the cake: two older women, early 50s, get into a heated debate about account ownership of a debtor who finally paid up, meaning they both thought they were entitled to the payment towards their goal and the other shouldn't get it. Anyways, it's getting loud, so I go to the bathroom to see what all the commotion is about. The one woman, I'll call her Dirty Jen, is screaming at the other woman, Barb. She yells, "Yeah, what's it like? Do BJ and old shriveled junk every night?" Barb had a 65-year-old boyfriend. And Barb retorts, "You, of anyone, should know. You used to do BJ in the old parking lot for McDonald's." I couldn't hold my crap together and burst out laughing. That was the day I found out Dirty Jen would do BJ, a 70-year-old, in our own office's old parking lot for cheeseburgers and McNuggets. Story 36. I'm a lunch lady for high school kids, and during fourth period, elder church members will come in and mentor struggling kids a few feet away at the tables. Well, I had just put out some delicious-smelling mashed potatoes and chicken, and this artsy junior came in and sees the potatoes and yells in a deep voice, "I'm gonna nut!" And the church members look over at her, and I clap my hand over my mouth because I immediately burst into laughter. I love these kids. I really do. Story 37. NYC construction had a 16-foot truck back into the loading dock with a load of concrete form panels we had to unload. Easy enough, just use a power jack and it's a half-hour task. The bed of the truck was about 4 inches higher than the edge of the dock, still not an issue. One of the carpenters tell the 4 months on apprentice to go tell the driver to lower the truck, which on larger trucks they can do, but a small flatbed isn't going to have hydraulics. So after the apprentice comes back with a look of defeat on his face, I tell him to go up to the tool shanty and get the dock raiser. Half an hour later, he calls the first carpenter saying he can't find it. Carpenter tells him to go find the foreman and ask him what he did with the dock raiser. Story 38. A brand new employee, who clearly was inept and made me wonder why I hired him in the first place, crashed into the glass wall separating our department and the rest of the office. It was impossible not to laugh, though. I managed to hold it in for a few minutes before I ran out of the building to laugh my ass off. His oily face left a nice Han Solo carbonite print on the glass. Second story. At a previous company, a rather rotund coworker shat himself and did not realize it. Somehow, the outside back of his jeans was covered in crap. He went to lunch with other coworkers and sat in someone's car with his crafty ass. No one said anything. Story 39. Two offices next to each other share the same run of ventilation ducting. A higher up in the upstream office hears a few underlings in the other and calls them up. "Hugh, hey, who's in there right now?" "Yule, just some of the plant guys." "Hugh, as supervisor, isn't in there? Or high-level admin?" "Yule, nah." "Hugh, oh, okay, thanks." He hangs up, opens a panel on the vent duct, and throws a handful of pepper downstream, then just sits back and listens to the screaming. Story 40. I work in a corporate atmosphere in an important industry, that's all I can say. Currently, there are inflatable rainbow donkeys hanging by their necks like a noose, suspended from the ceiling. Not sure about context. No, this has nothing to do with being gay or homophobic. Many of our colleagues, directorates, and managers are gay, lesbian, and we have trans members of staff. They aren't pride flag rainbow. They're red, green, blue, and purple pinata-looking donkeys. Interesting with the Democrats thing, but we are in London, UK. Story 41. I used to work for my father, and he was very loyal to his second-in-command, who was the most inept person I've ever met. When he was going through a terrible divorce, he was living out of his office for like a month, as he thought his soon-to-be ex-wife was staying at his house. Come to find out a little while later that his wife actually moved out of his house right after he moved into his office, and it took him a month to realize that his house was vacant and that he was living out of his office, sleeping in a sleeping bag on the floor for absolutely no reason at all. Story 42. I work at a grocery store. One day, I was at the self-checkout machines. Across from the machines used to be our toys, seasonal, etc. section. In that area was a box containing wiffle ball bats. Just above that, at about eye level, was a large sign. Basically, I could see everything but the person's face, and they couldn't see me. Anyways, I see this lady walk up to the box. I see her body move like she's looking around. She doesn't see anybody near her, so she grabs a wiffle ball bat and starts swinging it like a sword. This lasts about 10-15 seconds before she ends up smacking herself in the face. She looks around again, she can't see me past the sign, decides no one saw her, and puts the bat back and quickly walks away. It was so hard not to bust up laughing. Story 43. Back when I was an auditor, I was at a client office during the year-end close in Jan-Feb. It's about 11 p.m. at this point, and the client has left. So rather than sit in a cramped conference room, a handful of us are sitting around the floor in the employees' cubes so we have some privacy. My manager, sitting around 30 feet away, starts going, "Caw, caw," in his cube, so I then start doing it back. Our director, who we didn't realize was also sitting on the floor, joins in from even further away. Call, call. The three of us start doing this all at once, and the partner walks out of her private office and just stands there dumbfounded until she couldn't hold it in anymore and burst out laughing and shaking her head at us. Very stupid, but rather funny. At the time, story 44. For 6 years, I worked resort security in one of the most popular college spring break hotspots in the country. I have a lot of funny stories, but the one that still stands out occurred during one of the first weeks on the job. Around 4 a.m. when the bars close, there's always this Walking Dead type parade of drunk college kids. We had bushes in front of our resort, and it was always an impromptu bathroom for intoxicated individuals that couldn't find an actual toilet. So it was no surprise when I found a schwasted 20-something watering the foliage. I shine my flashlight at him and yell, "Hey, Git!" And his reply still gets me, in a thick southern accent, while spinning around, stream still flowing all over his sandaled feet. He goes, "What?" Just the fact he replied to Git like it was his name, he knew he was that Git. Story 45. Worked for a local home security company that naturally had cameras everywhere. They were a great source of entertainment. My favorites being the time an employee thought they could get away with stealing from the storeroom. They replayed it on the TVs that faced the call center and billing department, so we could all laugh at the dummy being caught red-handed. After the roads froze, which never happens here, my coworker made a very ungraceful sliding turn across 2 lanes of traffic, the grass in front of our building, and across our parking lot. He avoided hitting the building by dumb luck. His little brother made sure most of us got a copy of the camera feed for that one. And then there was the time that an AT&T employee picked up a prostitute across the street, then used the parking lot next to ours to complete his transaction. Story 46. I worked at a call center for a PC manufacturer ages ago. We had all of these systems we used to set up the agents in so they could speak to customers and view records and such. The training people created false agents all the time for training and testing purposes. One day, they decided to keep one of the fake agents in the system and named him Kevin Stevens. Kevin was 100% fake, but he was assigned to queues since it was an automated system. He could be set to auto-receive calls, which of course a customer would disconnect because no one was on the line. He got recognized for top stats numerous times. They had to hit him off when a bunch of people voted for him to be the best employee, and he was supposed to receive a reward from a local hockey team. Story 47. One of my colleagues stepped in dog crap on the way into the office and dragged it all the way up the stairs of the building, across the carpet and to his desk, without noticing. Soon, everyone started commenting on the appalling smell and looking for the source. It wasn't long before the facilities department were able to track it from the door to X's desk. X is an extremely obese man in his late 40s and struggles somewhat with physical tasks that require exertion. Once the culprit had been identified, facilities and HR refused to deal with it. We're a mid-sized private company, and so the next half hour we all watched X on his hands and knees, face to the floor, scrubbing away trying desperately to clean up this Hansel and Gretel trail of crepe that he was responsible for, while the rest of us just splackmaned. Story 48. The company I work for bought the building next door and planned on knocking the wall out for expansion. My boss at the time, fairly big guy, decided he was going to put on a Kool-Aid Man costume and bust through saying, "Oh yeah." Story 49. Not much goes on here. That is hilarious. It's a pretty dull environment. But one time I was walking with the boys to lunch and we passed by an empty room. The phone is on speaker, and this guy on the phone is just yelling, but nobody was in the room. I found that rather humorous. Here you are going off and ain't nobody in the room. Story 50. I worked at a fashion and clothes store. A woman in her mid-30s came in, took a pair of shoes from a shelf and put it in her bag, then tried to leave. We of course spotted it on CCTV. At the gate, the anti-theft thingy bleeped. The guard walked up to her and asked her to open her bag. "No, I will not. We saw you steal a pair of shoes." After a bit, we put her in the back, guarded, to wait for the cops. Turns out that the left shoe was a size 6 and the right was a size 7. Oh, and the punishment she received was, of course, much worse than she would have had to pay for the shoes. Story 51. The handicap washroom where I work, large room, single toilet, lockable door, has a large floor-to-ceiling mirror. It was very clearly used for sex recently based on a very odd configuration of sprints, handprints, etc. that were left on the mirror. Story 52. I didn't see it per se, but I heard about it. I work at a computer lab, and on Fridays, I'm the only employee there oftentimes. One Friday, I was talking to a patron who was standing near my desk, and I got a call from the library, which is below us, telling me that someone told them that someone in my lab was punching and kicking one of our potted plants. It's a big lab, and due to its shape, you can't really see the entire thing from any one of the desks. And it has scared another patron. They had video footage too. I did see a coworker chasing a non-service dog through the lab once as well. Story 53. Worked at a modern Mexican joint. On April Fools, we all told our mod that we couldn't make the shift for a variety of reasons. Sick, no babysitter, car down. Our plan was to have me yell April Fools since I was the first in. But when I saw her frantically calling in other servers to cover our shifts, I cowered and just got straight to work after a quick hi. She didn't even question me being there and giving her my sick excuse earlier. An hour goes by and she is still near hysterics when the next in comes through and yells April Fools. Maud is tearing up from utter rage and laughter as we all admit our childish antics. Luckily, with jobs still in hand. Story 54. Not my story, my coworkers. We work at a bank and she came into work one day around 11 a.m. One of the openers wasn't on the line, so she assumed he was eating lunch in the back. This is a supermarket bank, by the way, so it's very small, and we eat in the small vault room. Anyway, she goes through the 2 doors and uses her key to open the vault room where this kid is eating. As she opens the door, a sizzle is heard, and when the door is fully open, the kid turns around with a spatula in hand, a big smile on his face, and about 1.5 pounds of chicken breast grilling on a George Foreman. Story 55. Used to work at an old-time pottery, a big retail chain that sells home decor and anything else you think of. We were having a very slow night at the registers and started a rubber band fight. No big deal. No one is around to see what we were doing. Until, that is, I run around some large boxes to retrieve some of our rubber bands. We'd gone through most of a bag of 100. There is an elderly gentleman who'd created himself a cozy nook out of the boxes and was sound asleep, no doubt waiting for his wife. About 80% of those rubber bands were on him or very close by. Needless to say, I did not collect the bands. Story 56. The store manager got into a play fight with one of the employees. He had the employee in a headlock. The employee pushed forward to try to get the guy to let go. They went back into the office and proceeded to break a shelf. It wasn't busy, so me and the other 2 guys who were in the kitchen were laughing our asses off. The manager was like 54 and the employee was in his mid-20s. The manager was a hard ass about working, but he knew how to duck around too. The employee always liked to screw with the store manager endlessly. It was always a good time. Story 57. Another one at my work. Mind you, work in an office with professional people. Walk into the men's bathroom. I go to pinch a loaf, open the stall door, and there is literally crap everywhere. I mean, this guy must have had the shivering squirts really bad because most of it didn't make it in the toilet. It was on the toilet seat, on the toilet flusher, on the wall, on the floor. I was disgusted, but also found it hilarious. I felt really sorry for the cleaning people. Anyway, it was kind of an inside joke in the office and witch hunt to find the culprit. Story 58. I work early morning stocking for a corporate retail store, and there's a lot of shenanigans going on before we open. Most of us are fairly proficient at riding shopping carts and trolleys down the aisles, and a couple people can manage to steer them around corners. But our general manager recently went speeding off riding a shopping cart, tried to skirt around a corner, and instead went barreling into a display of stolen bread, German Christmas food. We had to pick up a tie-wearing adult man from a pile of cakes, and then spent the rest of the day giggling whenever he suspiciously glanced at the stolen display all day.